Greetings, nerds, geeks, and gamers of the third kind. Nate the Nerdarchy here from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. And I am doing the live chat, and as you can see from the title, it is going to be about all the kinds of terrible things that kind of portend doom in your game, as well as answering some questions in the chat as they come up. And talking about answering those questions, I'm going to actually have to grab the link so I can answer some questions that come up. So let me know in the comments to the side, the live chat, what exactly you're interested in talking about. And we are also going to... Hey, what's up, Noximus? So basically, one of the things, the Eclipse is happening in a few hours where I am. For some of you, it's already happened, right? If you're in the US, I don't know where else in the world it's going to be going on. But back, pretty much there's been all different kinds of ancient myths and legends about different things that have happened in the world, and that they've basically were a portent for doom or a great change. Kind of like, I mean, even the word cataclysm, original Greek, comes from the a deluge or flood. So even cataclysm, which we kind of just use for in general bad stuff happening on a big scale, like volcano eruptions and different things that people would be like, it's pandemonium. So there's physical things like earthquakes and eruptions that directly affect people because people die. And evil portents in my game usually come down to me laughing. Like maniacally laughing or just regular laughing. Oh yeah, Fraginator. I guess are you in a space that the eclipse is going on right now? William, you said it was 11 a.m. for you. Yeah, it's supposed to be happening, I think 2 to 4 around my area. So I'm not taking a break from the eclipse to come talk with everybody. So basically, I wanted to talk a little bit about using them in your game. So sometimes it's kind of like clearing the board. So, hey, there was this really prosperous city, and now it's an undead wasteland. Well, what happened there? In the Chimes of Discordia, in our Gryffindor campaign, there is an area that I've claimed for my own that's east of Gryffindor, and the Thrycreen Empire is gone. All that's left is a few ruins within, ruins within the vast desert expanse, as well as mutated Thrycreen and some other bits from that era. And then there are some towers that still stand on the outskirts, and that's where my Scions live in my 5e game. And they basically hold back this chaos storm that has been going on for a very, very long time. So they're basically, it's stable in the sense that it keeps getting pushed. So basically, every time it comes to an edge of the Thrycreen, what used to be the Thrycreen Empire, it gets pushed back by the Scions with the different methods that they use with the towers. And originally, those towers were outlooking towards other empires and other people as basically the first line of defense against spotting incoming armies that were going to deal with the Thrycreen. But that was so long ago. Many people only know the Thrycreen as these monstrous eaters of people and men that they've heard about, these giant insects that eat people. And that is what one of the, in our game, Nerdarchy's game, that's an area that has a really catastrophic event occur back in the day that still affects the world as it is now. So if you want to create some kind of ruin someplace, I'd suggest having an earthquake that destroys things, or having some kind of plague. A plague's a great way to incorporate an enemy if you want to do something with the plague victims, or just in general, the plague can be the backdrop for inner politics happening. So interconnected people that are all trying to one up each other in this disaster, either by looking good to the public, looking good to the higher ups to try and get promoted in some way in this thing that's going on. Oh, excuse me. So those are some of the things that you could have. It could be a completely political game, and you could still have this terrible thing going on in the background, like a plague or some kind of celestial event that actually affects what's going on. So in this case, I mean, you could also have an issue where if there is a group that believes something as what we consider benign and just a cool event to look at, like an eclipse, if you see that and you take that and this group of people say, well, that's actually a portal that opened up in the God of Light, you know, you can kind of like, because we tend to write stories and deal with concepts such as, you know, either gods that walk the earth or gods that a multitude of gods. This could be seen as like the god of shadow in an eclipse style. It could be the god of shadow in some way, trying to kill the light. That could be just seen as that. So that could be seen as, if you're in this shadow god group, you could see that as your time to strike. Like, now is the time to eliminate all the opposing leadership. Now is the time to, get rid of all of the, God of Light's followers, places of worship or something. So that could be a time. And to the people, from the other side, if you're not in on this, oh yeah, they had a conspiracy that they set up ahead of time. You just see them as like a natural force coming in and destroying what's going on in your life. So you wouldn't necessarily see it as like, oh yeah, that was a group of guys. They all just decided together and just timed it. So it was like symbolic to go along with their movement, rather than it being like some kind of more heavenly phenomenon or celestial event that informed what was going to happen. So I guess it's all the way on how the commoners, as well as the people involved in the shadow organization, view the eclipse. Is the eclipse them rising? The shadow organizations rise, and they have a chance to eliminate the God of Light's influence in a certain section of the realm, or is that so do they view it that way, or is it actually the eclipse is actually divinity informing the reality, what's going on? So it depends on how heavy-handed your deities are in your world, on whether or not you could use it like that. And let's see, Pokemon for WOT, Scions in 5e. Yeah, I call them Scions. I know it's Mystics in 5th edition, but I've been calling them Scion Assistant things for like 20 years, so it's a hard habit to break. I like calling them Mystics works for me because there's already monks, so we know what monks are. So if we think of, your idea of a mystic is some person who's kind of like heady, and like kind of centered in that meditative sense, but might also kung fu fight. So, that's taken up by the monk archetype in 5th edition. So the mystic can fall easily into the category of that otherworldly, unknowable power. All right, William, I'm trying to create a new world campaign where there's one city of people and the adventurer's job is to expand the kingdom. Okay, so similar to it's like a wild expanse, like trying to tame Alaska or something, or is it more like the colonies coming from Britain to England? It's a cool idea. It's definitely a interesting story arc to do, because there's plenty of like creativity that the players can use, but there's also kind of like built-in plot devices you can use that are going to go along with things that we already know from different histories for when people expand into an unknown area, or an unfamiliar area. Oh yeah, so like Taming Alaska. Excuse me. That's a I think that would be a really cool story arc, and you can put, I mean, you can put whatever you want in there. It's nice in that way, especially if your players don't know anything about it. If you're playing in a world that everyone already knows kind of what's going on, I can see that being an issue for giving them that surprise factor to that. Hold on a moment. All right, sorry about that. So where were we? Oh, so cultures back in the day, and also today, there's people around the world that view celestial events like the eclipse, like trembling of the earth, and different movements of the stars and the celestial bodies as something that is predictive of what's going to happen, kind of like a portent or a prophecy, linking, like basically they're taking it and they're changing it and they're making a metaphor into belief, basically, in that sense, when they take something like an eclipse or a flood or anything like that. Now, I mean, when they're physical, like when they're a flood, when they're a plague, when there are eruptions, or when there's earthquakes, those things cause devastation and kill people. So that's not very far-fetched to say this is going to change the world, or change the world as the people knew it within that area. So, I mean, if you think about, what is it? The space in between Morocco and Spain, it's theorized that at one time there was a land bridge in between those two areas, and that it was like a seawall. So, if you think about it, oh, well, there used to just be rock there, and then eventually one time the rock got thrown away, and because the area around it was lower, you have the sea just coming in and rushing in, destroying everything for however long, and creating the Mediterranean area. That, regardless of whether or not that really happened, that can kind of give you an idea of, well, how much, if you did have a landmass that was holding back the sea, what exactly would occur with all that? So that's a large area. Imagine that's really fertile ground, because that's where all the water would settle. So that's a really fertile ground, the entire area. So you have however many people can fit, like nations worth of people could fit in that water expanse. And then imagine them all being washed away in some time. So that in that instance, that could have happened from like any of the events, eruptions, earthquakes, excuse me, comet. I didn't put that one in. A comet or a meteor or asteroid, whether it strikes or not, it's considered like a big deal. So, and people from ancient times considered it a big deal all the way up to, nowadays. I mean, geez, in the U.S., there are people that basically a group of people committed suicide while excuse me, while a comet was going overhead. So I mean, it was a smaller scale. There wasn't people running around the streets screaming when something like that happens, because we know what kind of event that is. We don't have to guess. We know it's a comet. I mean, we landed a probe on one. So aside from someone sticking their hand in it, it doesn't get much more real than, taking a machine that has video recording and stuff like that and landing it on an object. Yeah, true mate, comet, as the prophecy foretold. And another thing is, if you're in the know and everyone else isn't, and you actually just say, oh, a comet's just something that comes around every once in a while, and this one was, if you start saying, oh, it happened here, here, and here, and here, those weren't different comets or different, portents of doom. Those were all the same thing that just comes by. So I guess it's a difference between if somebody has a vision of everything being kind of like elliptical orbits and things, you can kind of say, well, that's not one that, you know. So it basically depends on what level of tech you're at, on whether or not how believable the portent of doom is. I mean, nowadays, if you get seismic events, they're going to what was it? So sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments. Nowadays, you get seismic events, and you're like, oh, this might erupt, or this might have an earthquake occur in the area. And the same thing with super big storms and things like that. You're going to see those super big storms coming due to radar and all that Doppler stuff with Weather Channel stuff. I don't know. Fill in the words yourself. But all that stuff is kind of like showing us when a really big storm is going to come. So we don't see the black clouds on the horizon and go, oh no, I didn't know this was going to happen. How bad will it be? Will like the sheep get carried away in a tornado or something? And you know, areas where tornadoes occur, I mean, they're not so predictable, but there's areas where we think they may occur, and there's places where we say, hey, they might happen, which is completely different than, you know, out of the blue, oh, it's a storm. I have no idea if a tornado is going to suck up all of my farm animals and blast them around the area, or break my house or anything like that. So I'm just going to go hide in the cellar until it doesn't sound like it's a storm anymore. Starcrafter, didn't they have a movie where the guy goes back in time and threatens to remove the sun, and then when they agree to his demands, he allows it to return? It sounds like that could be a movie. I just don't know. I mean, you're talking about like a sci-fi made for TV movie, or a bigger movie that I just don't know. Oh, Yankee and King Arthur's Court. Yeah, that's a situation in which events that you know happened back in time, you can say, oh, well, I know these are going to happen, and you seem like some kind of wizard or something, because you can predict the unpredictable portents and prophecies of doom. Yeah, blame the moon druids for the eclipse. Oh yeah, and if you're, let's say there's like sun worshippers and moon worshippers or darkness worshippers, the same kind of thing with the shadow cult. They could see it as them being now in power. Even they have power even over the sun during the day. So probably some place that has a big mythos of that is going to have a big buildup of this kind of split, like, you know, half and half. Probably two deities that decided to share the world. So the sun is a deity, and also the moon is a deity, or the darkness is a deity. And in that case, you'd have these two competing factions, and you'd have these two competing worldviews. Or it could just be that you're like, oh yeah, these two gods, this is the mythos, this is the creation story in a sense. And people could see that as a usurping or overthrowing of the natural order. And that's, oh, you know, imagine it's like 3,000 years ago, and you kind of know, you know, the dates, this is, you know, when it's going to be hot, you know, when it's going to be kind of cold on average. And you can kind of guess when you're going to plant things, and when, you know, such and such happens, and when it's going to be rainy, and when it's not going to be, you know, not so bad, or it's going to be a drier season, or it's time to like cut the wheat and put it aside, you know, all these kind of things that revolve around cyclical events that are predictable. So, I mean, there's no supermarket. So if something messes up the predictable events, or threatens to mess up the predictable events by being something you could not predict, then that is going to cause chaos in just simply through people's worry and people's desire for predictable outcomes. So they're going to be worried about whether or not these things are predicting chaotic times to come, like Pandemonium and stuff. Tidal Wave is a pretty dangerous spell, like Cult of Druids. All casting that on a city would be a pretty big deal. Yeah, Tidal Wave. you get enough people together, you could just, I would just say, compound the effect. StarCraft crafter. Yeah, the Mayans had that calendar. I mean, what did they had? They had all the way to the procession. So I mean, okay, so if you have a calendar that's a really long time and it goes from the procession to the other procession, that's kind of like you just use the old calendar again to tell all the dates for things. Maybe they considered that you know, everything that happened within the procession would just simply happen again in a different manner. David Bliss, good point. Yeah, and Avatar is a good example of a storyline in which you've got people that can use pretty much magic, and they've got their whole philosophy on how the world works. And one of the things is during like solar and lunar eclipse, different bending loses power or gains power based on that. And you know, it makes perfect sense that if you're a super powerful person of just one particular power set, that you would hide yourself away when you're the weakest, put yourself in a series of iron boxes or something. Kyle Ellis, I never understood why a comet made firebending stronger. It's a ball of ice and dirt, but it looks like it's on fire. It's like a little tiny miniature sun sailing across the sky. So that's why I'm going to say. I mean, realistically, the moon's just reflecting the sun's light, so it's not like the moon's producing light power. So, I mean, in that sense, you know, that doesn't really make sense. It's like, again, it's like metaphor or similarities that you can create linkages in your mind for why things are the way they are, and that's. But when, you know, going back to breaking the cycle of what's happening. A cataclysmic event is a great way to break the cycle, because there's going to be a certain amount of people who want to put it back to the way it was during, you know, eruptions of when you have eruptions, when you have earthquakes, when you have floods that destroy sections of the land. So there's going to be a group of people that are thinking about the old days and want to return it to that predictable cyclical cycle of every year. This is what we do every year. This is how it goes, and this is the area we know. And there are going to be other people that are going to be more exploratory and decide that they're either going to leave and go someplace else or do something different than what they've done before. And that can be like symbolic as well as belief is power, Raven. Yeah, that can be symbolic in a sense of, well, we've done this before and then this terrible thing happened, so let's not do what we've previously done. Kind of like what's that called? Like a coming to God moment, where you're just like, oh yeah, I've been bad. I've decided terrible stuff happened, so now I'm going to do this. I'm going to be religious now. You know, that kind of idea. So, sorry, I'm getting a call from my wife on a live stream. Okay. Bye. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't an emergency, because she knows I'm on a live stream. So it was not super emergency. Or in Warhammer, the twin-tailed comet, whenever it comes, something big happens. What was it? Like the... is that kind of like the birth of the... No, I'm thinking about Warhammer 40K and the Emperor. Yeah, so again, that idea of linking events that occur towards basically creating symbolism in your game or in your story or whatever with what occurred, to saying, well, I should do something different so that this terrible event doesn't occur again. And that's at the very basis of that, you could say that's how superstitions are born. That idea of, I'm going to do this thing because it seems that when I do this thing, I have better luck or bad things don't happen. So like, oh, walking under a ladder. Well, you can get stuff dropped on you walking under a ladder. So it doesn't matter about whether or not the physical action of walking under a ladder creates bad luck. There's a high chance you're going to get something you're going to hit with something and you could die. So, that would be a perfect example of not walking under a ladder. And, what was it? Back in the day, mirrors were so expensive that breaking them was like a really bad deal. Like that was a really bad thing to do. It's like, you just like might as well light something that you love on fire that took a lot of money to make, because that's the equivalent. And it's a whole bunch of glass that could kill you, because it's mirrors weren't safety glass back in the day. You got big shards that could actually kill you. So yeah. Yeah, Kyle, misuse of cause and effect in society. Well, there's always a lot of that going around. That's happening all the time. It's happening right now as well. So it's happened before and it'll happen again. How would you deal with a D&D Pompeii scenario, day leading up to it and the finale? Well, I would say that it depends. If you're going to take the characters as their residents of that city, and the campaign is getting people convinced that they need to leave and saving as many people as possible by having them leave, or whichever way they decide to do that, forcibly imprisoning them. Heck, if early enough, you could conspire with the banks to put everyone in debt, put them in debtor's prison, and just make debtor's prison be on an island that's really safe someplace else. I mean, that would be really bizarro way. That would be like the supervillain that you are is actually the best guy in the world because you saved them from the disaster, but you've done it in such a terrible jerk way. So, however you want to get them out of there, I would say that would be a very interesting game, especially if the players know out of game and also are told a little bit in game, but not in a believable way. So if you point, I would point, I would kind of set the tone for it, but not make it overt, because you're not going to want the PCs to just walk in, be able to show a piece of evidence that makes everyone understand that they need to leave Pompeii. So I'd come at it from the standpoint that people don't want to leave where their home is. They don't want to say like, oh, well, if I leave this and I leave all my possessions, or I take all my possessions, what if you're a baker or basically if you need that area to make your living, moving for however long it's going to take before Pompeii explodes, it's going to be a problem. You're going to lose your livelihood. You might as well move at that point and never come back. So there's times where if you convince everybody they need to leave and then the place never erupts in their lifetime, that kind of is like, will be a story that's told. And then the next time it actually happens, they'll be like, well, but we were told that this was going to erupt last time and it didn't. So there's there's ups and downs to that kind of stuff. But I would go from the standpoint that the players live in the city. They get inklings of kind of hints of things that something's going down, and you've got to disperse it. I would disperse it through several different adventures and hooks and encounters that they don't necessarily know that's what's going to be happening. But then when that's kind of like the full on effect of that happening is, there's going to be a time where they still don't know when it's going to occur, but they try and get as many people as they can, or they have to leave themselves. If they can't convince the city, or they can only convince like 10 people out of an entire city to leave, and then the place erupts, then that's going to be, that would be like a mission failure, but at the same time, they got who they got. So I would go from that, and then like kind of gauge how successful they were on how many people they got out, and the creative ways they decided to get them out. Like the debtor's prison thing, that would be a really harsh way to do it, but that could be a way to get people out. I mean, you could also, like, if you had some kind of totalitarian control over them, that's another way you could get them out. So there's really nasty ways to get them out, but there's also a lot of room for creativity there on how to get them away from basically D&D Pompeii. Yeah, Dragonlance and the Convergence of the Three Moons. Tesmek, suggesting a red dragon dives into a dormant volcano, setting it off to destroy the town who dared to cross it. Is the stream good? I had a little bit of a hiccup. Sorry if I disconnected. So using something's ability to deal with something like really powerful earth elementals creating eruptions. So you could have, in essence, mages, clerics, and druids creating these natural disasters through the use of their different spells and summonings and things. In Gryffindor campaign, I have recently made a giant underground network underneath Gryffindor. I had somebody summon 2 earth elementals, and I planier bound them for over a month. And I just said, well, they have their siege weapons, basically. How much damage can a block of? They don't get tired. It's just breaking apart and destroying all of this area underneath something. Now, if I was a supervillain or like the evil guy is going to take over the place, I could put giant sinkholes underneath the areas in the town that I didn't want to exist anymore, or that I wanted to get conveniently swallowed up by some deity or demigod for their transgressions. So that is a serious concern when you have powerful spellcasters. And I could easily very well do that. So that's, then it's, in a month, I've taken out a lot of area. So I can only imagine if I wanted to destroy like one citadel, or, there's a castle and there's a siege. Well, I'm going to start, 1,000 feet down and dig out their foundation, or 300 feet down. Who's going to be 300 feet down on the ground for this? So 300 feet down, start digging out their foundation, mining it backwards by digging down, getting there, and just, and then eventually remove in 1 or 2 days, remove a good part of the support. I could have an entire wall collapse into this, 100, 200 foot sinkhole, and bam, and then we just walk up over the rubble, put bridges down, and we've conquered the castle. So that's kind of maliciously using summoned creatures, but I could see that being a really good use of the spells available to you. So using binding some kind of creature that has power over the elements to you, making a fire, especially in 5th edition, they've got the layer actions, which are going to augment the area around them. So I can imagine a volcano that was dormant becoming active if a fire drake or a red dragon decided to take up residence there or in the area. Starcrafter, yeah, casting earthquake just offshore to create some kind of tsunami or something. I would say that's a good use of kind of like know-how on what's going to happen based on an earthquake off the shore, how it can create a tremendous wave. And that's not saying, oh, it's not metagaming to apply what you know currently to the past, because there is an island of people that actually survived the tsunami. They had the tsunami over in India, in the Indian Ocean. And what they did was they felt an earthquake, and they said, okay, whenever the earth and the sea have a fight, the earth grumbles and the sea punches back. In essence, that's like the loose understanding that I got out of it, is basically they have a metaphor for the natural events that occur. So they go to the high ground, and then the sea comes up, and then it goes away, and then they go back to where to their lives after the sea goes back away. And I think they've been like 30 or 40,000 years. These people have been living there. Their descendants. So they know this. They know that this happens. So they didn't lose anybody, or they lost like one person or something. While there was hundreds of thousands of people that had their lives destroyed. So that's a situation in which you can say, oh, well, I know if there is shaking in the water, that it creates this natural event. Can everyone else hear me? I know I've been skipping a few times, so. Yeah, a few people are having trouble with the stream. I've had it actually pause a few times here, and that usually does not happen at all. Eric, Grahita or Grajita? I'm going to go with Grahita. Question: do you enjoy making the PCs interact with the more defenseless members of a monstrous humanoid tribe? Children, women, old people? Not normally. But if they attack an orc village, they're going to be those. If it's not a war camp, they're going to be, they're going to be monstrous humanoids. The rest of the tribe, basically. And in that case, that should really have them call in the question whether or not this is people being displaced by some event somewhere. So it's a chance for the PCs to see what's going on in the world. But sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It really depends on the group. If I think they're just going to kill them all the time, I will eventually be like, yep, it's a war party. There you go. Enjoy. But that hasn't been a while that has not happened in a while where I've given them the opportunity to role play with basically non-offensive or non-lethal members of a group. Usually when I give them the opportunity, they take it. Because, they can always, if they get nasty with them, they can always just fight them off. If they suddenly brandish weapons or try to beat them to death with rocks or something, there's always an option for violence. So, but right now, it looks like they're defenseless. So my players usually interact with them. Yeah, Joe Fisher, it's freezing for me too, the live stream. Every once in a while, it's cutting out. So I usually just hit the reload button at the top when I'm watching a stream. Dropping the Darnan's instant fortress. Kyle, that's a funny way to get a giant wage. It's like a giant cannonball. Snaps. The Onion brings good material, asking people not to look directly into the screaming spirits of the damned during the eclipse. Yeah, it made you laugh. That's funny. The Onion's good times. But Eclipse Omens could be a good hook. Yeah, I agree. That's part of the discussion for this, is the idea of using eclipse, eruptions, cosmic events like comets or shooting stars. And not shooting stars like every once in a while you'll see, but a meteor shower. And how to use torrential rains or tidal tidal floods or things like that. Or what was it in China? There's was it the Yellow River or something? The River of Sorrow. That's banked because they've been farming for so long that when the river floods, they controlled let it out into the region. But one year the banks broke and many people died. I don't know how many, but it was a tremendous amount of people died. So it's the River of Sorrows. Even though they rely on it for the water and the nutrients that it brings to all the farming area, it still was a terrible event that killed many people. So you could apply some kind of philosophy, or you could apply some kind of event or disposition of the local populace towards that event occurring. I'm sorry, I think I'm going to be cutting it short. I'm just having a real hard time enunciating because I feel like coughing all the time. So I think I'm going to get a drink and I'm going to have to cut it short today. Thanks for joining me for talking about cataclysmic events and Pandemonium. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You can add your own kind of events or story arcs that you would like to do. And sorry if I didn't get your questions today, but next time on the live chats or at the end of the week on our Saturday live chats, Quest and Adventures, which is our Q&A, you can ask me then. So again, let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, stay nerdy.